You know exactly what you're supposed to be doing with your money. That's not the problem. You've read enough, watched enough, you can talk about it fluently at a dinner table. You know the vocabulary, the principles, the arguments on both sides. And still, alone at the end of the day, you feel like a fraud who has just been very good at not getting caught yet. There is a version of you that exists in public. This version has answers when money comes up, sounds measured, doesn't panic visibly, maybe even gets asked for advice. People in your life have quietly filed you under sorted, responsible, has it together, and you have never corrected them, because somewhere along the way, being the person who has it together stopped being something you felt and became something you performed. You're not sure exactly when that happened, but you know the performance is running. You could feel the effort it takes. What nobody in that room knows is that the person they think is sorted hasn't felt genuinely okay about money in longer than they can remember. It doesn't feel like crisis. That's why it's so hard to name. Crisis has edges. Crisis is loud. Crisis gives you permission to say, I need help. This is quieter than crisis. It's a low, chronic tiredness that lives just under the surface of every financial decision you make. It's the exhaustion of managing something alone that was never supposed to be managed alone. It's the specific weight of being the person nobody thinks to check on because you've never given them a reason to. You wake up and the first thought is a number. Not a dream, not a plan, a number. Checking. Already running the calculation before you've had coffee. And you've been waking up like that for so long that you've started to think this is just what financial responsibility feels like, that the exhaustion is the price of being the kind of person you are. It isn't, but we'll get to that. Here's where the advice comes in. You didn't start consuming financial content because you were curious. You started because something felt wrong, and you needed to fix it quietly, without telling anyone it was wrong. The videos, the books, the frameworks, they weren't education. They were a private repair project you were running in the background of your real life. One voice said, invest aggressively. You felt a spike of hope. Maybe this is the fix. Another said, eliminate all debt first. You restructured, felt temporarily in control. Another said, you're thinking about this all wrong. Enjoy the present. You tried, felt guilty the entire time. Another said, sacrifice everything now for freedom later. You tightened, felt virtuous for 11 days. Every framework promised the same thing underneath the math. Follow this and you will finally stop feeling the way you currently feel. None of them delivered, because none of them knew what you were actually feeling. You never told them. Here's what performing financial competence actually takes out of you. It takes the conversations you never had, the times someone asked how you were doing and you said, fine, because the true answer would have required explaining something you'd spent years making look effortless. It takes the decisions you made alone that you shouldn't have had to make alone, not because you lacked information, because you'd built a version of yourself that didn't have anyone to think out loud with. The sorted person doesn't get to say, I don't know what to do here. The sorted person is who other people come to when they don't know what to do. So you kept the uncertainty private. You made the call alone. You absorbed the anxiety alone. And then you showed up and sounded certain, because that's what the role required. You've been doing that for years, quietly carrying the weight of a performance that nobody asked you to give. At a certain point, the reputation became a cage, because you can't admit confusion to people who believe you're the one who isn't confused. You can't ask for help from the people who come to you for help. You can't say, I'm struggling with this, to the people whose image of you is someone who doesn't struggle with this. So the struggling went underground, and the advice consumption intensified. Because if you could just find the framework that finally worked, if you could just get the numbers to a place where the internal state matched the external performance, then the exhaustion would end. But the framework never touched the exhaustion, because the exhaustion wasn't about the numbers. It was about how long you'd been doing this completely alone. And no spreadsheet fixes that. No investment strategy closes that gap. No expert's framework was built for someone who needed to be seen more than they needed to be optimized. You tried on the identities, not carelessly, with genuine effort. The minimalist phase. You thought, if I want less, I'll fear less. You cleared surfaces, felt lighter for a week, then the underlying hum came back unchanged into a tidier room. The optimization phase. You thought, if I make the math perfect, the feeling will follow. You built the systems. The systems ran. The feeling didn't follow. The fire phase. You thought, if I can see the exit clearly enough, I'll stop feeling trapped by the entrance. You calculated the number. The number kept moving. The exit kept receding. Each time you switched, you told yourself the previous version had been naive. Close, but not quite right. This one was finally it. But you were never actually switching frameworks. You were switching costumes on the same exhaustion, dressing the same feeling in different vocabularies, and hoping one of them would finally make it feel different. None of them did, because the framework was never the problem. This is the part that took the longest to see. Every expert you followed was not showing you how to manage money. They were showing you how they managed their own fear, their own history, their own specific nervous system that had been through something and built a system to survive it. The debt eliminator built their framework from a place of having felt financially unsafe. The rules are tight because when you felt that unsafe, loose rules feel like standing on ice. The optimizer built their framework from a place of feeling genuinely comfortable with risk. Volatility doesn't activate danger in them, it activates interest. That's not intelligence, that's nervous system. The spend on what you love voice built their framework from a place of having once lost years to restriction and decided never again. They're not teaching you abundance, they're teaching you their specific recovery. And you absorbed all of it, tried to wear all of it, felt like a failure every time it didn't fit. But it was never going to fit, because it was never made for you. It was made for them. There is a specific loneliness that comes with being the person who is assumed to be fine. It's not the loneliness of having no one around. You might have plenty of people around. It's the loneliness of being known for a version of yourself that is only partially true, the competent version, the sorted version, the one who doesn't need checking on. And you built that version carefully, deliberately, because at some point it felt safer to be seen as competent than to be seen as struggling. Maybe because you watched what happened to people who admitted they were struggling. Maybe because struggling felt like a thing that happened to people who didn't try hard enough. So you became the person who always had it together. And then you woke up one day and realized that person is very respected and very alone with the parts that aren't together. Here's what years of consuming other people's certainty did to you, specifically from this angle. It didn't just confuse you, it gave you something to hide behind. As long as you were still researching, still refining, still finding the next framework, you had a reason why you hadn't arrived yet. You were still in the process, still becoming the person who had fully figured it out. The consumption wasn't just about finding answers. It was about maintaining the story that the answers were still coming, that the feeling of not being okay was temporary, that you were almost there. But almost there has been the address for a very long time now, and at some point, almost there stops being a location on the way somewhere and starts being the place you actually live. And the frameworks keep arriving, and you keep trying them, and the exhaustion keeps accumulating. And nobody around you knows because you've gotten very good at looking like someone who is almost there. Think about the hours, not the money, the hours. The hours you spent consuming content that was supposed to fix something, but was actually just keeping you company in the discomfort. The hours you spent switching frameworks. The hours you spent performing competence in conversations where the honest answer would have taken 30 seconds, but the performance took everything. Think about the decisions that got delayed because you were waiting to feel certain enough to make them. The things you didn't do because no framework gave you clean permission. The version of your life that kept getting postponed while you waited to arrive at the feeling of being okay. You didn't waste those hours because you were careless. You spent them because you were trying, alone, to solve something that had nothing to do with information. You were trying to feel safe, in the only way you knew how, which was to know more, control more, understand more, optimize more. And the thing that would have actually helped, being known, being seen, not having to carry it alone, that never made it onto the spreadsheet. Here is what none of the experts will tell you, because it doesn't fit inside a framework. You don't have a financial knowledge problem, you have a financial loneliness problem. The confusion, the framework switching, the certainty chasing, the endless consumption, it's not stupidity, it's not weakness. It's what happens when someone who is carrying something heavy has been doing it alone for long enough that they've forgotten what it would feel like to put it down. The advice kept arriving, and you kept absorbing it because advice feels like company. It feels like someone is in the room with you, someone who has faced this and survived it and is telling you how. But they were never actually in the room. They were on a screen, speaking to a camera, addressing an audience of thousands with a framework built from their own private history, and you were alone with their words, trying to make them fit a life they'd never seen, wondering why you still felt like something was missing. Something was missing. It wasn't a better framework.
Every expert you ever followed was doing something they almost certainly didn't intend. They were modeling what it looks like to stop being afraid of the specific thing that once scared them. They were showing you their personal exit from their personal version of financial fear. And because they delivered it with confidence, with community, with data, it looked like universal truth. But it was always personal. Always. The certainty wasn't evidence of correctness. It was evidence of relief. The relief of someone who found something that worked for them and wants you to feel what they felt when the fear finally quieted. They were trying to give you their relief, but they couldn't, because their relief was built on the specific shape of their specific fear, and your fear has a different shape. And no amount of following their framework gets you to their relief, because you were never trying to solve their problem. You were trying to solve yours, alone, with tools someone else built, for something else, in the middle of the night, without telling anyone. Here is what I want you to sit with. Not a framework, not a system, just this. The version of you that has been performing competence for years, that person is exhausted, not broken, not failing, exhausted. There is a difference, and it matters. Exhausted means you've been carrying something real for a real amount of time in a way that was genuinely hard. It means the effort was real, the commitment was real, the care was real. It just wasn't supposed to be done alone. It was never supposed to be done alone. The frameworks failed you, not because you applied them wrong, but because no framework was built to address what was actually driving the behavior. They were built for information problems. You had a loneliness problem, wearing the clothes of an information problem. Think about the last time you talked to someone, really talked about what money actually feels like for you. Not the strategy, not the plan, the feeling. When was that? You have been the expert in the room for so long that you forgot you were also the person in the room, with all the things a person carries, all the uncertainty a person lives with, all the exhaustion a person accumulates when they've been the one who holds it together for everyone else for long enough that holding it together stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like the only option. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to not know. You are allowed to stop performing competence for long enough to remember when it actually feels like to be okay. Not optimized, not on track, not almost there, just okay. You've been waiting for the right framework to give you permission to feel that. There is no framework. There was never a framework. There was only you.
finally allowing yourself to put something down that you were never supposed to carry alone.